Have you ever noticed how some people seem to shift the entire atmosphere just by doing nothing? They don't argue, they don't explain, they simply pull back. Quietly, calmly. And yet, everything around them starts to move. Tensions rise, people scramble, emotions stir. Now imagine what would happen if you did that. If instead of reacting on autopilot, you chose stillness. If you picked silence over justification, distance over confrontation, how might the world respond? That's the crux of it. The moment you stop showing up on demand, mentally, emotionally, physically, you disrupt the pattern. Suddenly, you're no longer a puppet tied to strings of guilt, fear, or habit. And that shakes people. Because your absence reveals how much they relied on your compliance, your predictability, your constant availability. But the moment you retreat, the rules rewrite themselves. The illusion breaks. And those who thought they had you figured out, they're left staring at a stranger. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So ask yourself this. When you become unreachable, who starts to panic? Who lashes out? Who pokes at you just to get a rise? That tells you everything. Not just about them, but about the invisible contracts you've been signing without knowing it. Because every time you say yes when your soul whispers no, every knee-jerk reply, every emotional reaction costs you. A sliver of your energy, chipped away to keep others comfortable, even when they were never really with you in the first place. And when the day winds down, what remains? That heaviness in your chest, that quiet frustration, that hollow space you can't quite name. But let me tell you why it lingers. Because you've made yourself endlessly available to people who haven't even earned a second of your silence. This isn't about abandoning the world. This is about coming home to yourself, about embracing what Carl Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming whole, honest, and real. And that journey begins the moment you understand this truth. Silence can hold more power than 1,000 perfectly crafted arguments. And stepping back, not to run away, but to reclaim your energy, isn't weakness, it's sovereignty. So let me ask you directly, with no filter, how long will you let others hijack your emotions? How many times will you let them poke your unhealed wounds and still expect yourself to smile, nod, and perform? Maybe it's time to cut the string, to retreat, to become an enigma. Because the moment you stop being constantly available, the script flips. You've been taught to always be on, answer fast, be agreeable, keep the peace. Say yes when every part of you is screaming no. Since childhood, you are programmed to believe your value is tied to your accessibility. But here's what no one told you. That need to always be available isn't kindness, it's captivity. And as long as you keep offering yourself on demand, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you'll be used, drained, and discarded the moment you're no longer convenient. Why? Because the predictable become tools. People will start pressing you like an emotional panic button, only reaching out when they need comfort, attention, validation. Then, back on the shelf you go. And you don't even notice it, because you're still caught in the illusion that showing up for everyone will make someone finally show up for you. But life doesn't work that way. Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, praised, loved. But it's that very mask that keeps you performing, overextending, shrinking. You say you're fine while you're crumbling. You respond instantly, even when your spirit's on empty. You explain, justify, defend, as if you owe the world an invoice for your existence. But here's the deepest truth. The more you center yourself in other people's lives, the more you vanish from your own. Being constantly available is a quiet betrayal of the self. It looks like kindness. It feels like responsibility. But beneath the surface, It's a hidden hunger for approval, for belonging, for control over how others see you. And that need for control, it comes at a cost, a high one. Your peace, your energy, your sense of self. You start giving out pieces of your vitality like it's endless, but it's not. Your energy is finite, deeply finite. The people who expect you to always be there don't actually want you, they want what you bring. The comfort, the validation, the distraction from their own silence. But the moment you shift, set a boundary, stay quiet instead of reacting, prioritize yourself, suddenly you're the problem. You're distant, you're selfish, you've changed. But the truth is, they're not upset because you changed. They're upset because you stopped serving their emotional convenience. And here's the brutal part. The more accessible you are, the less people value your presence. Because what's too easy to get is rarely treasured. What's always available becomes invisible, taken for granted, turned into an emotional rag. No one respects what they never had to earn. No one values what never says no. So pause for a second. Who genuinely deserves your time? Who has earned your presence, your attention, your listening? More importantly, who deserves the power of your absence? But before you answer, we need to unpack something deeper. Why do we react so quickly? Why do we justify ourselves, rush to explain, bend over backward to please? Carl Jung had a name for this. He called it psychic energy. And that's what we're getting into next, because your energy is your most valuable currency. And if you don't learn how to guard it, someone will figure out how to use it against you. If this is resonating, take a second to hit subscribe. It helps the channel and helps you stay connected to content that empowers. Now back to Jung. He didn't view the mind as some machine that just reacts to stimuli like a switch. He saw the psyche as an energy system, where every emotion, thought, and choice draws from a well of internal power. So the question becomes, are you choosing where your energy goes? Or are you handing that choice to the world around you? Every impulsive reaction, every defensive explanation, every time you argue just to be right, or offer comfort to someone who never reciprocates, you're leaking energy, wasting strength on what doesn't refill you. Jung said it simply, what you resist persists. The more you react, the more you get tangled in what drains you. Emotionally exhausted people aren't weak, they're misaligned. Not broken, just misplaced. And here's what happens when you run on empty. You become exposed, vulnerable, easy to manipulate. And guess what? People who thrive on control, who feed off neediness, who sense emotional weakness, they notice, they circle, and they take. They can see it. They notice the leaks in your boundaries, the way you rush to fix, to explain, to hold everything together. And they take advantage quietly, consistently. Carl Jung said that a healthy psyche is one that can contain its energy, keep it within the system. That means saying no without guilt. That means sitting in silence without feeling like a coward. That means watching before speaking, choosing when and how to engage. Because real power isn't found in the reaction. It's found in the pause, in the space where choice lives. But you can only access that space when you truly know yourself, when you can spot your own emotional triggers before they hijack you. Ask yourself, how many nights have you lost sleep replaying a conversation that ended hours ago? How many hours have you wasted trying to decode someone else's bad behavior? That's your life force leaking. That's your psychic energy feeding ghosts that should have been buried long ago. You are keeping dead stories alive. And for what? For closure? For justice? For love? Sometimes your silence is the closure. Sometimes your absence is the justice. Psychic energy, when protected, creates something magnetic. You don't need to announce your boundaries. They're felt. You walk into a room and the air shifts. Not because you're loud, but because your energy is anchored. But when your energy is scattered, when you react to every provocation, chase every conflict, you lose that center. You become fragile, invisible, unstable. And the world, it doesn't hold space for the unguarded. It consumes them. That's why the real work begins with self-observation. What sets you off? What makes you betray your stillness? Those exact moments are where your energy leaks out. And that's where you need to build awareness, not to become cold, not to disconnect, but to become sovereign over your own inner world. Here's one of Jung's most powerful truths. When you conserve your energy, you disrupt the projections others place on you. And that shakes people, because now we're entering the shadow zone, the realm of silent manipulation. In the next part, we'll dive into how opportunists feed off your energy like parasites, and why your absence shatters their entire strategy. Get ready to see clearly, to confront the subtle patterns you didn't even know were draining you. You think you're in control. You believe your reactions are conscious choices. But the truth is far more unsettling. Most of your emotional responses aren't chosen. They're conditioned. And those who know how to trigger them don't need to fight you. They just push the right buttons, and you obey. Every time. Carl Jung called it projection, the unconscious act of seeing in others what we can't face in ourselves. But here's the side no one talks about. While people project onto you, you become their screen, their mirror, their escape hatch. The more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas for their illusions. Think about it. The friend who only calls during a breakdown. The partner who praises you, but only when you're useful. The person who guilt trips you into staying, helping, listening. Again and again. It's not love. It's not connection. They're not engaging with you. They're clinging to the role you agreed to play. And why do you keep playing it? Because you're scared. Scared of being the villain. Scared of not being loved. Scared of being left. But the most effective manipulation doesn't shout. It whispers. It hides in the quiet shame of guilt, the belief that you owe someone your time, your energy, your emotional availability, even when it slowly eats away at you. And here's the sharpest truth of all. The manipulator doesn't need to control you. They just need you to keep reacting. But the moment you stop, the whole game collapses. When you begin to say no, calmly, without apology, when you choose silence instead of over-explaining, and retreat instead of chasing validation, something subtle but seismic begins to shift. The projections others have cast onto you, those masks they made you wear, start to fall away. And for many, that's terrifying. Because if you're no longer playing the role they assigned, who are you? And more importantly, who are they without you reflecting back the image they needed to see? This is where the discomfort begins. Your unavailability becomes a mirror they can't control. Your silence, your stillness, your refusal to react. It doesn't just disturb them. It forces them to look inward. And not everyone is ready for that confrontation. The emptiness they feel, the chaos they've ignored, the needs they've tried to silence. All of it bubbles to the surface in the absence of your emotional labor. That's why the backlash comes. The sudden coldness, the guilt trips, the accusations that you've changed. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've stopped playing the part. You've stopped being their emotional crutch. Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's exactly what happens when you break the cycle. Your absence lights a match in someone else's shadow. And for people who've always used you as an escape, that is intolerable. But here's the deeper question. Are you ready for the consequences of that choice? Are you ready to be misunderstood, maybe even resented, for choosing yourself? Are you prepared for the silence that follows when the old dynamics collapse? Because that silence, awkward, aching, and unfamiliar, is where a new kind of strength is born. It's the silence that rebuilds your center, the silence that sharpens your intuition. And it's exactly where we're going next. In the next part, we're going to explore something most people fear and few truly harness: the psychological power of silence. In today's world, noise is currency. Everyone's shouting to be heard, rushing to reply, addicted to the instant gratification of reaction. We've been conditioned to believe that silence means weakness, that not responding is the same as losing. But there's a different kind of silence, a deeper one. Not the silence of surrender, but of sovereignty. Not passivity, but presence. This is the silence that unnerves manipulators and disrupts toxic dynamics. Because it's not emptiness, it's depth. A kind of quiet that commands attention, not by force but by clarity. Korean philosopher Kyung saw silence not as absence, but as fertile ground, an incubator for transformation. And he was right. When you stop reacting, you start noticing. When you pause, patterns reveal themselves. You begin to see what was once hidden in plain sight: the games, the cycles, the roles you've been cast in without consent. And once you see, you cannot unsee. This is why silence is feared, because in silence, you begin to remember who you were before the world taught you who to be. And that kind of remembering, that's power. Raw, untouchable, unapologetic power. Have you ever noticed how unsettled some people become when you don't respond? When you don't explain, don't justify, when you simply go quiet? It's not that they miss you, it's that your silence steals their ability to control the story. As long as you're speaking, reacting, defending, you're still playing by their rules. But the moment you go silent, everything shifts. The rules dissolve, and that kind of shift is terrifying to those who thrive on your predictability. Because real silence isn't about shutting down. It's about reclaiming your energy. It's the refusal to carry emotions that aren't yours. It's stepping back from the chaos and saying, not everything deserves a response. Jung called this process individuation, the unfolding of the true self. But to hear your real voice, you must first turn down the noise, and that requires space, distance, silence. Not silence as absence, but silence as alignment. But here's the part no one tells you. Silence has consequences. It will strip away relationships that were built on your availability, not your authenticity. It will confuse people who only understood you through the lens of their own needs. It will provoke labels, cold, arrogant, selfish, from those who were never interested in your truth, only your compliance. This is the uncomfortable cost of growth. The deeper you go into your own wholeness, the more you realize that words are not free. Every word you speak carries weight, carries energy, and not everyone has earned access to your inner world. That's why the mature learn to speak less, but mean more. Because silence, when it's chosen with awareness, is not withdrawal, it's power. It's the language of those who no longer need to perform. And that silence, it makes people confront themselves. It echoes louder than any rebuttal could. It creates a vacuum where their projections collapse, where their expectations lose footing. Your absence becomes a mirror, and what they see there isn't always beautiful. That's why they push, why they provoke. Because they don't want to face the truth your silence silently reveals. But the most transformational silence isn't the one that disrupts others. It's the one that rebuilds you, the kind that strips away the noise and leads you back to your essence. It's in that space, empty of obligation, free of performance, where your real power returns. Your presence sharpens, your intuition awakens, and your energy, once scattered, begins to gather back into wholeness. That's where we're going next. Because it's not enough to turn down the volume of the world. You have to learn how to direct your energy with intention. To decide what you feed, what you ignore, what you walk away from entirely. Your attention is sacred. Your soul is finite, and not everything, or everyone, deserves access to it. If you're in the middle of that reclaiming, if you're setting boundaries and finding strength in your stillness, then this next part is for you. In my book Beyond the Shadow, I break down Jung's most essential teachings and give you practical tools to guard your energy, set deeper boundaries, and return to your true self. The link is pinned in the comments. Let's go deeper together. It's not enough to understand all of this on a mental level. Insight alone won't change your life if your habits stay the same. If you keep saying yes when every part of you wants to say no, if you continue responding to messages that drain you, engaging in hollow conversations, or maintaining relationships that only exist out of habit, you're not evolving. You're performing self-awareness without committing to self-respect. And that's just another form of betrayal, this time against yourself. Real transformation doesn't happen in your thoughts. It happens in your decisions. And it starts the moment you become intentionally selective. This is where emotional discipline comes in. Being consciously unavailable isn't about being cold or superior. It's about no longer being on call for anyone's chaos, needs, or expectations. It's about finally taking ownership of your energy, your time, your peace. And it begins with small rebellions, pausing before reacting, letting a message sit unread, walking away from arguments that only lead to nowhere, turning your phone off without apology, saying, "Marche, not today. I'm not available. That's not for me." And here's the key. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't need to defend your boundaries or narrate your silence. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment you reclaim your sovereignty. That's what unsettles people. Not your absence, but the fact that they no longer have a role in your story where you're always the accommodating one. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote that individuation, the path to becoming who you truly are, always requires a period of sacred isolation. Not loneliness, but solitude. With purpose, a kind of retreat from the noise so you can hear your own voice again. It's in that silence where identity gets rewritten, not by the expectations of others, but by the truths you uncover at your center. Want a real measure of your evolution? Watch who starts pulling away when you get quiet. Pay attention to who tries to provoke you when you stop playing the emotional rescuer. Notice who says you've changed, when what they really mean is, you're no longer easy to manipulate. Those reactions aren't signs you're doing something wrong. They're evidence you're finally becoming free. Make no mistake, being unavailable will feel uncomfortable at first. You'll question yourself. Guilt will creep in. People will call you selfish. But this is part of the unlearning. You've been conditioned to betray yourself for others' comfort. So of course, choosing yourself will shake the ground a little. Of course, it will make people uncomfortable, especially those who are fed by your lack of boundaries. But this discomfort is the doorway. Conscious unavailability is the first act of self-loyalty. Every time you say no to what drains you, you're saying yes to what nourishes you. Every time you walk away from the chaos, you're reaffirming your worth. And every time you stop justifying your needs, you become harder to manipulate and easier to respect. That's why not everyone will celebrate this version of you. Your absence will make people confront wounds they never wanted to acknowledge. It will reveal just how much control they felt through your emotional instability. And when that control dissolves, so did the connections built on it. That's when the rupture comes. And with it, the grief, the space, the silence. You'll feel like something is dying. And in a way, it is. The self that used to perform, explain, overgive, and self-abandon. But here's the truth. You're not losing anything, you're shedding. You're releasing what was never real. And what comes after that? That's what we'll explore in the final part. Because beyond the rupture, beyond the discomfort of solitude and the fear of being misunderstood, something powerful begins to take root. A rebirth. A return. A wholeness you never knew you were missing. And it only comes when you finally dare to walk alone. It's time to understand a hard but liberating truth. The loneliness of the strong is not a punishment. It's the path to true freedom. When you stop being emotionally available to everyone, something begins to shift at a deep level. First comes the silence. It's raw, loud, unsettling. It presses on your chest and echoes in your mind. You start questioning yourself. Did I go too far? Am I being cold? What if I lose people who cared about me? But that silence is not your enemy. It's your detox. It begins to strip away the noise, the guilt, the emotional debris. It starts to purify you. And then, slowly, silence evolves into solitude. But not the kind of solitude that comes from loss. This is sacred solitude, a space where you finally show up for yourself. Not as a version curated for others, but as you truly are. It's not absence, it's presence. Total, rooted presence. The kind that no longer negotiates its essence just to belong. This is the solitude of the strong, the solitude of someone who refuses to betray themselves to feel accepted. And in that space, clarity begins to rise. Where there was once mental clutter, there is now inner stillness. Where there was once neediness, a grounded strength begins to emerge. And in this new terrain, something powerful happens. You stop reacting to life and you start creating it. Jung taught that individuation, the journey to becoming your authentic self, requires stepping away from the collective. You must unmask, untangle, detach. You must walk alone for a while so that your truth is no longer shaped by the demands or projections of others. That's what conscious unavailability really is. It's not isolation for the sake of distance. It's a return, a sacred homecoming to the self. And yes, some people will fall away. But look closer. They weren't in love with you. They were in love with the version of you that served their story. When that story ends, they disappear. Let them. Because in their absence, you'll finally feel your own presence. You may lose connections, but you'll find peace. You may be misunderstood, but you'll stop explaining yourself. And that, right there, is when you become undeniably valuable. Not because you're chasing validation, but because you've stopped giving away pieces of yourself to be tolerated. This is a rebirth, a quiet revolution of the soul. It's the beginning of a new kind of life. One where you're no longer available for emotional scraps, for manipulative affection, for relationships that deplete more than they nourish. You will only welcome what honors your energy, your values, your peace. And if you've made it this far, it's because a deeper part of you is already ready. A part of you knows being loved means nothing if it requires self-abandonment. And real self-love, it begins the moment you choose yourself, even if it means standing alone for a season. So now I ask you, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even hated, in the name of your inner freedom? Are you prepared to pay the price of becoming you, fully and unapologetically? If this message resonated, if it shook something awake, drop it in the comments. I choose my peace. Let's see how many of us are ready to step into this new chapter. And if you're still here, don't stop now. Watch the next video. It's more important than you realize. I'll see you there.